Hello. So I'm just gonna get rid of this meeting is being recorded warning. Could I please have I can be heard?
Sorry, yes, I was typing a thank you to Jill. We can hear you, yeah.
No, no worries. Thank you so much. Start my speech soon. PY is in the chat, please. Opposition bench manufactures a validation industrial complex, one which has multiplied rates of depression and anxiety among young people, especially in the first world, even though rates of poverty are drastically falling. We would much have preferred a world whereby social media algorithms could prey less on individuals' insecurities. We are absolutely proud to propose. Before I get to my argumentation about how we improve mental health, let me just quickly establish what our world looks like. The first feature of our world is that individuals can still like or share posts. We are perfectly comfortable with that. We're comfortable with algorithms deciding whether that makes you be more likely marginally to see a post or not. These are symmetric on both sides. The crucial difference, however, is whether or not these likes and shares are visible to the public or to the individuals themselves. In the status quo, you can see on your own post, as well as the posts of other individuals, how many individuals have liked this post. We would prefer to go a step further and not let you know that at all. We would also prefer a world whereby you will not notify whenever someone likes your post, unlike the status quo where you are. Note that this is already happening in many social media sites. Instagram and Twitter have already removed the number of likes that are visible in some posts in some areas. We would have preferred them have to have this foresight significantly earlier at the start. Why would this happen? This could happen because governments around the world realize the negative health effects of this onto young people and legislated it away in our world. That's entirely possible. It could also be because behavioral scientists designing these systems thought more carefully about the ethical implications early on, or hired more consultants in terms of ethics consultants and decided that it's a bad idea. However, it had happened on our side. Sure, they had incentives not to do this, but it just didn't happen in our world somehow. My argument then on why we ensure that we do not harm individuals' mental health on our side of the house. I'm going to start with some work building on how these metrics are designed. Note, social media is designed by corporations who deliberately want to get you hooked. This means that they design these numbers as a deliberate source of validation for individuals. You want to have people get notifications for how many people like their posts, and you want to design these notifications in such a way that you will have dopamine hits whenever you get them, right? You want to be able to ensure that individuals get happy or less happy based on whether they post get engagement. Note, your incentive isn't necessarily to improve people's mental health, but to get them to continue using this stuff. This means then that you want dependency as your main outcome rather than genuine validation. You see this empirically when your friends talk about how much likes their posts I've had literal friends get more excited and exclaim that a really famous or popular friend of theirs like their post, and conversely get quite disappointed when their posts don't get liked as much. Why then is this nature of social media necessarily structurally unfulfilling for individuals? There are three reasons. Number one, social media necessarily means that you're connected to a wider social circle. You have literal thousands of people in your immediate social vicinity whom you could directly be followers with. No, the more you engage with social media, the more followers you have and the more people you follow, because you will trade follows in order to get more followers if you place this material. No, thank you. In the chat, please. All of this then means that the odds of you encountering someone who is just more social media marketable than you increases exponentially. Someone who is prettier, someone who's richer, who has more time on their hands, has a nicer relationship at the moment. All of these hundreds of things necessarily means that they're going to have individuals who have more likes on their posts than you, necessarily meaning you're comparing yourself with these individuals as a result. But secondly, even if you are attractive, even if you are rich, even if you are happy at the moment, these things are fleeting and temporary, right? Maybe sometimes it's exam season and you just can't go out as often. Maybe you just went through a breakup. Maybe you're going through a financially difficult period. Maybe you gained weight or are aging. Maybe you got your first wrinkle. All of these are necessarily structural factors that mean that no individual can continuously get this validation continuously over time. These things are fluctuating at all times and necessarily things that are fleeting at best. The third reason is that there's a hedonistic treadmill at play here. Sure, 500 likes might sound like a lot now, but once you are used to 500 likes, that becomes your new benchmark. You seek for 700, 1,000 likes on your post. All of these definitely mean then that any validation you get on their side of the house, even if you get any, is necessarily fleeting. What are the impacts of this? The first is that people compare. People can see structurally that their posts are 500 likes less likable than the next fella. They necessarily see themselves as losing out against people around them. Or they compare themselves to themselves before, when they previously had more likes and now they're having fewer likes as well. The impacts of that are number one, continuous anxiety that you have to perform better for your likes, have to continuously get more and more likes, because that's literally how your dopamine hits arrive, and you're literally addicted because that's how these platforms are structured. Number two, there's always going to be disappointment because of the structural reasons I mentioned earlier for why you'll never really be satisfied. Minimally then, this is a form of violence onto individuals who are not able to continuously get that validation. It is a form of continuous emotional disappointment for them, continuous source of anxiety and mental and psychological harm for these individuals. Given that this is the way most people interface with social media, this is the largest impact in the round, in that you hurt all of their mental health. I take the point.
If social media platforms will always be engineered for engagement and addiction, why does it change on your role when you remove the number of likes?
Yeah, so like I'm explained that this is the most pernicious way this can happen. Maybe we legislated it away. That's entirely possible. But I'll talk more later about how qualitative engagement is less damaging than quantitative engagement. But the second impact of this, and this is larger than just the way you feel, is the way you act. Individuals act differently in order to be able to chase likes in ways that are often harmful to them. Trivially, this can look like picking the time of day and this that you post on. But more importantly, this looks like your spending habits, whether you partake more in consumerism, even if saving might be better. This looks like the way you eat, the way you drink, the way you decide whether or not you are satisfied with your body and change your body. Think about it, right? What happens when a girl trying to recover from an eating disorder starts getting fewer likes than she did before? The impacts on her mental health are exponential, the point at which opposition base has her hooked. What happens on our side of the house? Number one, if people can no longer interface in social media in such a way that is based on their likes, they begin trying to establish qualitative material. So they qualitatively interact with their friends by commenting and sharing their posts or talking to them on social media. Why is this better? Number one, it is more consistent. It is easier and more reliable to have a few close friends like and comment on your posts rather than trying to appeal to hundreds of acquaintances on whom they are, with whom you're like at the whim of which you're getting likes. But more importantly, it is significantly less toxic. It is harder and there's a higher barrier to leave a mean comment on an individual and on their body image, for example, as compared to just scrolling through a post where you think a girl looks a little bit too fat for your liking. All of these are ways by which on our side of the house, even if these exact same individuals still chase validation, they do so in significantly less harmful ways, in ways that are more consistent, more protective of the most vulnerable individuals, the teenagers who are trying to find validation from a corporation who will never give them any and whose business model is predicated on them never being satisfied.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Leader of Op.
Hi, am I audible and visible?
All good, yes.
Okay. For POIs, turn on your camera and then I will answer you. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Side opposition is going to enter this debate with a very simple argument. That is, social media metrics and data bring much needed insight that has to be democratized for everyone to see. On side government, you give social media platforms too much power when you give them the monopoly on data, on insight, to be able to change the platform in any way they see fit. They're still able to engineer social media platforms for it to be addictive, for it to be destructive for people on the ground. They have the wrong solution for the problem that they propose. The first thing that I'll do then is to talk about in framing, what do social media metrics actually bring to the table? And I think there are two important things here. The first is that social media metrics, like the amount of likes, the amount of comments, and the amount of shares that you have on a post or even impressions, reflects the above the line performance of the user towards the content. So for example, if you're a small business, you can see how effective, for example, your marketing strategies are. If you're someone who wants to share information, for example, about your achievements, you see how many people, for example, have seen that. Did your mom see that? Did your grandma see that? Or what have you? Reacts, for example, and shares, see if your people find something funny, etc. But more importantly, it gives insight on how content and the platform performs as a whole. So is your content strategy as a small business or as an individual, for example, just trying to sell your clothes online, something that is actually effective? And for the platform, is the way you engineer the platform one that is actually meaningfully creating a positive engagement among the user base? So this is used by pages to adjust their content strategy, to segment, for example, their users, and to improve the kinds of content that they have. And for developers, to improve the kind of service that they give for people on the ground. On their world, if they say that they will still have access to data, that social media platforms will still have the access to engagement, and are still able to count that, that means that on their world, development is less transparent, it's more in the black box, and you give social media platforms too much power to do on their own bidding. Which is why metric-driven development, and one that is transparent and open to everyone, is important, precisely because users in a social media platform have a stake on the quality of the platform as well. So you necessarily have to be transparent and consultative in the way you develop these things. The next thing that I want to do then is to just give a short bit of response, because the main argument that comes from Ian is that we want to improve the mental health of these users, and they use a very boomer way of trying to prove this, because they're like, oh, people are addicted to likes. They're just trying to chase, for example, the dopamine high of getting 1,000 heart reacts, for example, when you post a thirst trap on Facebook or what have you. This is just not exclusive to the kind of problem that they propose. Note that the problem, if you break it down to its simple core, right, this is a problem of attention seeking. People are going to find ways to farm engagement from people on the ground if they so desire to. So in their world, where likes do not exist, where shares do not exist, it is the world where people go to the farther extremes to get more comments, for example, to get wows, for example, from the comments that you have on the ground. So the core problem, the teenage problem of having to seek desire and validation from other individuals, it still exists on their world. And if you believe the characterization that social media platforms are pernicious in the way they engineer the platform to farm engagement, you would agree that it's going to be much worse. But it's not just that, right? It is, in fact, on their world where metrics are gone, where people become more paranoid of how they get perceived by people. So if it's not 500 likes, they will overanalyze every single comment that they receive. Is this wow actually something that is genuine, or are they just being sarcastic? Are they just being ironic, for example? And you're going to ensure that the comments that you get are of higher quality. But lastly, again, it's just this doesn't stop platforms to engineer for addiction, for hook, to get people hooked and for usage, precisely because they're still able to push content that is important, is relevant, is likely to like get a bad reaction or get a more engaging reaction from you. They never really solve the core problem, which is why the argumentation from side opposition is more relevant. But before I proceed, yes, Ian.
But if that were true, then individuals who are not online or who just are online and base their validation off comments would be significantly more mentally ill than those who base it off likes. But empirically, young people on social media and who use it more frequently report genuinely just having their mental health wrecked by their inability to get traction on their posts.
But it's about how the world develops on your end, right? So if they never knew the concept of likes, if they never knew the concept of engagement, they're gonna find a new yardstick that they can use to measure how effective their post is. So it's just try to imagine how the world exists on your end. One argument, social media metrics allow for much needed personalization of content and to improve the experience of people on the ground, which is the most important aspect, especially if you want a platform that is transparent and democratized for people, precisely because that's what platforms ought themselves to be. The first premise of this argument is just that social media allows for greater connection among other individuals on the ground. So if they argue, we just want people to log off, we want people to have more genuine connections, there's structural barriers that prevent us from doing that social media brings uniquely. The unique selling proposition of social media is you don't have to travel halfway across the world to see your friend, to talk to them instantly and synchronously in a way that doesn't disturb, for example, their working hours. It's the ability for you to share posts towards other individuals, or even for businesses, for them to find a cheap supply chain to be able to actually sell their products towards people who are much more personalized and relevant to the kind of business that they want to do. So there are unique use cases that metrics generally improve and generally transform for the better, right? It's the ability for you to give a deeper insight as to how your content is performing, for example, or how the platform is performing as a whole. We think that those metrics are quite important. But second, it's just the reason why metrics are so important to exist and why they ought to be a core way in which we develop and perceive social media is just because there's just so much content out there for everyone to peruse. In YouTube alone, every single minute, thousands of hours worth of content gets uploaded. And in a world where you don't have the metrics to curate the content in a way that's relevant for users, means that you have to peruse so much irrelevant content and just ruins the user experience in a way that is irrelevant, in a way that is useless, in a way that is time wasting for individuals on the ground. So the quality of service that they receive is one that is worse, one that is depersonalized, and one that is not transparent. But third is that we allow algorithms to define our personal experience because it takes a lot of work for us to do so. Commenting, for example, is just so damn tiring. Maybe you just don't give a shit about that friend and you just want to leave them a like instead of just fully glazing them, for example. example, in the comment sections, etc. But second is that users have to go through these comments to assess performance. So if people care about how they get perceived on their world, they're gonna go much greater lengths to fully analyze, for example, the kinds of comments that they receive, even applying like sentiment analysis AI, for example, to see what the general sentiment of the comments that they receive are. If the problem again is just wanting to get engagement, they're going to seek that in any ways. And in their world, it's just so much worse. At least in our world, right? The kind of development, the kind of way your post performs on the platform is more transparent, more actionable, more objective, in a way that makes you overthink less, for example, and in one that actually makes data democratized for everyone on the ground. So it's on their world, a less personalized experience, a slow and inaccurate updates to the platform that is not consultative, and that's where they give them social media platforms too much power to farm engagement for people on the ground.
Thank you. Hello, TPM.
Hello, I'm going to assume I'm audible and keep your eyes in chat, please. Thank you. Not every debate is about massive economic harm or huge amounts of political change. There are some debates about whether this piece of technology makes people feel better or worse. I want you to imagine you are a young teenage girl that just posted a selfie of yourself on Instagram and you get 50 likes. Meanwhile, your best friend posts a similar selfie and gets 5,000 likes. How is the human brain likely to rationalize this disparity? You are likely going to feel less attractive, less beautiful, less popular, less desirable than your friend. Even if you always had the small suspicion that your friend was prettier than you, now there is a number that you are forced to see every time you open up Instagram that quantifies to you numerically that you are 1,000 times less popular, less pretty, less desirable than your friend. The claim that they try to weigh against us here is to say, well, small businesses need the data. They cannot win on this argument. If this was about regulation, in order to ensure social media is safe, governments can demand access to their information. They can issue subpoenas. They can bring these individuals to the court where they're forced to review data analytics, to the Supreme Court. This doesn't have to interface with users. But if their claim was that businesses need to know consumer trends in order for them to be better, this is just an inexclusive benefit on their side of the house. Businesses historically have done things like focus groups, market surveys, engagement surveys, market research, information from your own internal customer base. There are literally thousands of other ways in which businesses are able to get information about their customers. Even if social media was a better way to get information, it is one of the many. They are only making businesses lose one touch point of information. It's unlikely to spiral into the huge harms of businesses shutting down. Before I explain our case further, I have two simple metrics that already put Ian ahead of this debate. The first is on scale. There are millions of people that use social media, and the vast majority of them are not small businesses. The vast majority of people that use social media are people like you and I. People just posting pictures of ourselves, posting fit pics, posting pictures of our friends and our family. Therefore, Ian's claim right now is analytically the most important argument in the debate, because the average person has their self-esteem affected, and this applies to the most common user of social media, which is not small businesses. But even for businesses that exist online, social media is just one source of data. Most businesses have physical stores with physical customer bases and their own independent market research, and they have social media as one of the marketing mechanisms they use. Removing one aspect of the way in which they're able to remove perceived metrics does not lead to a huge harm. What is a huge harm that is distinct in this debate is the massive psychological harm that Ian outlines. The second way in which Ian already wins this debate is by explaining the intensity of the harm. The demographic that uses social media and the demographic that uses it most often is the younger generations. These are individuals that have fragile self-esteem. They are immature, they're insecure, they're reliant on validation from others. And this means that they are deeply obsessive about the numbers. When they open up their Instagram app and they see that their selfie only got 7 likes after 7 hours, they cannot help the feeling of insecurity that eats them up inside and makes them wonder when they go to school the next day, does everyone secretly hate me? Think of how many young teenagers pay for bot followers. Think of how many young teenagers
desperately beg their friends in their own private friend groups, please like my latest post, please like my recent fit pics. All of this is a cry for help, a cry for them to be told that they are likable. And if we remove the numbers, they are never confronted with the reality that maybe they are actually kind of ugly. I really don't want to sound like I'm exaggerating here, but humans are social creatures. Our self-worth is based on how others perceive us. When your post only gets 50 likes, it starts that process of overthinking. It awakens that latent insecurity. People don't like me. I'm undesirable. I'm unwanted. And I want to highlight here, the people that receive the least likes on social media are those that do not fit conventional standards of beauty, racial minorities who do not meet Eurocentric beauty standards, people who have a different body type from the skinny Victoria's Secret models that are hailed as the beauty standard, short kings like myself who might get less likes than Ian on an Instagram post. Even if you have a body positivity movement that praises short kings, even if you have diverse models that show different beauty types, this is pointless because no matter how much you tell me, Cavan, short kings are worthy too, when I open up my feed and I realize Ian gets 1,000 more likes than me, it's difficult for me to believe that short kings are actually beautiful as well. So therefore, all of the social inclusivity is pointless when the white girl with blue eyes is always the one getting thousands or more likes. It is a tangible and visceral reminder that you are less desirable. This is why their response was insufficient. Their response was to say people will be obsessive all the time. Note, other ways to chase validation are infinitely more difficult and inaccessible. You counting the number of comments you have is something that most individuals do not have the time to do. But more importantly, and this breaks the comparison, all of the other ways to chase validation are things that you have to opt into. So if you really want to compare, if I really want to compare Ian and myself, I would have to go through the arduous effort of taking hours to pour and compare between the different points of comparisons. But on their side, people never consented. The moment you open up the app, you are confronted with the number. You have like closed your eyes, like pretend you don't see the like number right below your post, which is something that people cannot ignore. So even in the case where people are still obsessive, the other ways to chase validation are more inaccessible and things that people actually have to consent into. Their second response was to say, well, people will be paranoid and they will start interpreting what the messages in their comment sections mean. Guess what? People do this already. They already try to interpret the implications of the comments or the reactions on their posts. So that harm exists symmetrically on their side and is compounded by the fact that they are forced to see all of those metrics as well. Humans are creatures that compare, and numerical counts are the things that we anchor our self-worth to. This impact is amplified when you notice how prevalent metrics are. On every post, on every page, there's a number that shows you how many comments and how many likes there are, and this number correlates with their self-worth. Before I move on, POI. Okay, moving on. So we've articulated the impact to individuals. I will now explain the impacts on a societal level. I have recently learned what the term racial means. If Naomi tweets that Jollibee is great, and I tweet that Jollibee sucks, and I get 2,000 more likes than Naomi, I have ratioed Naomi, and my opinion is the correct one. This is terrible for social discourse because the person that is viewed as correct, the person that is viewed as reliable, is the person with more likes. This has 4 harms. First, the person with less likes is demoralized and embarrassed and refuses to comment even further. They are downvoted into oblivion, and the mob of the opposite opinion is mobilized to dislike this comment. Second impact, people comment to try and get the most likes possible, which means that instead of engaging in genuine social discourse, they try to be funny, they try to use memes, they try to say skibbity toilet, they become sensationalist in nature. They don't engage in genuine social discourse because they're just trying to farm the validation of their comment having more likes. Third harm, people only comment in spaces where they predict they will get the most likes, which means that they never actually engage with the opposing opinion. They only engage in spaces where other people are confirming their opinion, which means you never get the exchange of ideas and the cross-pollinations of different opinion. Fourth and final impact, people are uncritical when engaging in social discourse. They just accept the most liked opinion. So even if you don't believe that this debate is about the mental health of millions of youth that feel terrible about themselves and cannot stand to look at themselves in the mirror because they do not receive enough likes, the last minute of my speech has given you enough reasons why this damages social discourse in a way that prevents a proper exchange of ideas on the platform which is the town square of the exchange of ideas.
Thank you, DPM. TLO.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Hello.
TLO.
Okay. I'll take POI's through voice. Oh, no. Okay. I'll start in 3, 2, 1, go. Before I talk about mental health and why we win that clash or whether that clash is even important in this debate, let's first talk about the model of Gov and how it becomes self-defeating. Because what comes from Prime Minister is that they suggest that people can still like and share on their side. However, users cannot just see the numbers. And therefore, my question is, it is unclear, therefore, how they get any benefits of developing the social media, insofar as a lot of the social media companies coming from Ben monopolizes the amount of data that they receive from these users, which means that the kind of updates that they usually create in these platforms are things that are usually not reflective towards, or not transparent nor reflective towards the user's preference. But the second as well is that if the data that they want coming from Prime Minister is qualitative, then they have to defend the existence of commenting section within those kinds of social media. It becomes unclear if a person is already socially anxious, if they're already comparing themselves when there is like and share buttons. It is unclear why this is exclusive on our side. And so far as a lot of these commenting section are still metrics where you can compare yourself. When a person comments more than the other posts, then you can see that, oh, I have less comments and perhaps I am ugly. And this is just like a lazy way for me to like symmetrize the harm. But what that shows is that it is unclear why this harm is likely to be exclusive. Where does the first thing that I would do is talk about mental health. The first thing I would note is that I think that they overblow this harm too much. What we suggest is that there are a lot of counterbalancing mechanisms to prove as to why you do not suffer so much when you see that someone has 10 more likes than you or 1,000 likes more than you. The first is just because people do not necessarily compare themselves towards individuals that are not proximate within their lives. That is suggest that I never compare myself towards Tony Gonzaga because like I don't know who Tony Gonzaga is, and that also like that's just different from me, right? But what that means is that most of the time the comparisons that exist within individuals and even in real life are between those people who are proximate to them. So it's likely going to be within their friends, within their families, and within their relatives. The second here is that most of these comparisons are often counterbalanced, or the thoughts on your head that says that you are ugly are often counterbalanced by just words of affirmation that comes from a lot of the support groups that you have outside of social media or within social media. Things that say "Go Queen" or something like that are things that gives you affirmation, that believes you, that you believe yourself, convince yourself that perhaps I'm not so ugly after all. But the third thing after this is just that there's just a finite pool of worries for a lot of individuals. They do not usually all think that like after they look at the social media, right? They don't go out of their houses and thinking about they're ugly because of this one guy that had a dislike in that post. What we suggest is that this finite pool of worries means that they also have to think about work, they also have to think about school, etc., etc. But more than that, right? The comparison that comes here is that absent numbers in social media, you still compare yourself towards the comments that you get, the quality of the photos that exist on the comparative of government. So if it's not within the comments, then it's the quality of the photos. You can see that yours is more blurry, theirs are not. That kind of harm is likely to still exist. But I would note that this is more solvable on our side. And this is because liking and just sharing posts or like liking, doing reacts, right? It's just easier to give for a lot of individuals because it doesn't take a lot of cognitive like preparation for you to prepare a sentence. You just have to click a button later. What this means is that even if you probably do not like the post, but you just know this person, you still like that post regardless of like whether you actually like that post, right? And therefore, it's easier to access most of the time. It's easier to do it. For their side, comments are harder to give precisely because it is a large amount of vulnerability that you are asking for a person to give a sentence in the public eye. These kinds of things means that you have less comments within posts like on scale on their end, and therefore more people just feel worse about themselves. Sure. You're
Sorry,
muted.
audio. So this is actually quite behind my speech. My speech already explained that you will often have a close circle of friends who will put in the effort to comment, but having 5,000 friends who will keep giving you 5,000 likes is just damn hard. Comparatively then, seeking validation through comments is more stable, more reliable, and probably less toxic.
Yeah, the first one here is that the comments still exist on our side. We do not just have to defend the liking buttons, and therefore that kind of benefit still exists. The second here is just that, again, if you are comparing yourself with your friends, it is just unclear why you have a friend always and almost all the time that just gets 10,000 likes. Like you're not probably friends with celebrities. But even if you are, I think you probably consented to that. You probably know that their lives are different from you, and therefore it's unclear why you're so affected by this if you're just an ordinary individual. The second thing that I would like to talk about is how they never responded towards the claim of Ben as when we suggests that social media uniquely benefits a lot of individuals. And this is because when you have data, you are able to improve the platform and to increase the utility of these platforms. That is good for the users who often can only access, for example, connections within this platform. And so for us, physicality is just difficult. It is expensive for you to go to Manila. It is expensive for you to mail like someone like letters or something like that. But secondly, it's just easier for you to connect with each other precisely because of the video things that you can do in social media. Absent data, what we suggest is that it becomes worse because we're not able to personalize this platform. But even if they can do it, and this is the best case, what we suggest is that this is also going to be very expensive on their side because they have to use other forms of technology in order to dissect the comments into data that they can actually use to improve that improve the platform. What this means is that a lot of more people are going to take up the brunt of that cost. That is to suggest that before you access Facebook, you probably have to pay like 100 pesos. And I would note that for a lot of people, even 100 pesos is very expensive when you're like accessing an application. Let's talk about very lastly about how we expand the utility of social media, which is a unique benefit that you get from our side. What we suggest is that on both sides, businesses and a lot of people will be forced to digitalize. They say that this is just big businesses. We say that it's not, because what we suggest is that a lot of people just cannot set up physical stores because it costs a lot. There's amount of rent that you have to pay. There's climate change that you have to think about, and there's just land and competition generally. This looks like, for example, right, why more people sell thrift clothes in like Facebook in a one-size bedroom, or why social media sell cakes and cookies, right? And why they need the data is because that it allows them to have insight to deconstruct the market. It allows them to create better marketing strategies or just segment the market so that they can create different products. The impact is just that you allow more people to gain more revenue and agency within the opportunities that are exclusive within the data that happens within that social media. And this is important because the people we are talking about this are not big businesses, but people who do not have enough money to set up the physical stores. While people can do it on their side as well, what we suggest is that the propensity to fail is higher, and therefore you reduce the utility of media overall.
Wonderful. Thank you, DLO. Kavwip.
Hello, am I audible and visible?
All good. Yeah.
Here's the voice. Okay. Let me speak in 3, 2, 1. Go. The first thing I'm going to clarify is about the democratization of the use of metrics. I want to be clear that on both sides, social media companies will collect information because you've already surrendered your right for them to collect their information either way, because government also agrees that on the other side of the house, they will get the likes and shares, they will get all of these things, but they will just be stored. What is the comparative on our side? You have a relatively more degree of control over the outcomes of the data they gather from you. That is to say, when you like and share, that tangibly leads to a re-personalization of the kinds of contents that come to your Facebook timeline, for example. So on our side of the house, you have greater control over the act of data over the outcomes of data collection, because you have tangible returns that you can get from it, i.e. when you like and share, that actively leads to a re-customization of the timeline that you have. On their side of the house, companies will get your data, but they do not have any tangible return to you. They're just stored there, they're useless. Which is why the material from Ben about how this gives overwhelming amount of power to social media companies still stand at the end of the day, because at least on our side, users can get some degree of utility on our side of the house when they surrender their data to social media companies. But secondly, I want to engage with the statement that comes from GovWeb about how you can always subpoena companies who misuse your data. I think that can happen on their side, because on their side of the house, you can't subpoena something that is invisible. On our side of the house, when individuals are much more likely to call out these bad companies and file complaints because they have tangible metrics, they have evidences, they can screenshot things that they were not able to see, that they weren't meant to see, as opposed to their side of the house where all this is invisible, all of it is in the black box. The second I'd like to answer is the idea of mental health, and here's what I'm going to do is to prove why Lia already explains why mental health is unimportant in the debate. The first reason is that Lia explains that the harm is not that big as government paints it to be. No, that the only analysis of government is that, well, high numbers, this just views how you compare yourself against others. But I think Lia's material about how you have a finite pool of worries, i.e. even if you do receive fewer likes, you're unlikely to overanalyze these things for the vast majority of your time, because presumably you also have other things to worry about. Say, for example, like school, family, friends, what to eat, where you go to sex, etc., etc. So it's unlikely that it is all only
Fine.
social media to take the most of your time. But secondly, even if you do compare yourself against a person who has 5,000 likes over yourself is only 15 likes, Lia explains that individuals necessarily scale down their comparisons to what is most reasonably proximate to them. So even if government does prove that individuals can juxtapose themselves against individuals with far higher likes, what Lia explicitly explains is that the harm is not that big because individuals are organically able to circumvent the harms of this comparison by scaling down. So this means that even if individuals are exposed to a lot of different kinds of content with different levels of likes and shares, Lia already explains why the harm is not as big as government paints it to be. But secondly, Lia flips the harm on their side, right? By explaining that comments are equally as perverse or more perverse. In fact, what I would suggest is that when Lia already explains is that it is hard for you to comment on an individual's post because it often takes a lot more headspace for you to construct words rather than to simply like and share. I would add on to that, right? In the best case that they do have comments on their side, it is much harder to interpret what the comments mean because there are things like sentiment variation between what you say and understand it to be what I understand the message to be. So there's a lot of semantic variation over these kinds of messages. So even if you do comment on individuals' posts, individuals are unlikely to get the most amount of utility from these comments. Compare that to likes and shares, which are tangible and objective in their meaning. When someone heart reacts to your share, heart reacts to your post, it means that they love it. When someone puts the carry app on your post, it means that they sympathize with you. All of these things are easier way to for your friends, for your mutual connections to send out their messages, and that is like a much easier way for people to feel validated. And the next thing that I want to be clear on is that on both sides of the house, people will seek for attention. I think the problem of government is that they assume that on their side of the house, people will be less attention-seeking, where in fact it's already implied from Ben and Lia that often attention-seeking behavior is independent of the emotion. It is driven by things like culture, norms, puberty, and hormones. Teenage children will remain petty, will remain dumb, will remain stupid. What changes on our side? If people will be attention-seekers regardless, note that we reduce the appetite for individuals to seek for attention because the validation is instant. It is easy for them to like, as opposed to their side of the house where it takes far longer for people to generate a comment, or even in the worst case, for example, you do not comment because it's just too taxing to write one. So on our side of the house, we reduce the propensity for individuals to crave more attention because we mediate it by the fact that people like it and share it. Go POI.
So on our side of the house, let's assume that's that validation. You get that validation in an abstract because trawling through like all the posts of another person, numerically counting out the comments is a psychotic thing to do. Comparison is therefore lesser, but we can still get a large amount of validation, even for people who crave it on our side.
So like, well, you don't need to scroll through all the people who like and share your comment. You can just see like how many likes and shares, right? But secondly, if you do say that it's psychotic to just count all the comments, likes and shares, then probably the harm of insecurity and anxiety won't happen to the degree that you paint it to be, insofar as individuals won't pay that much attention to these kinds of metrics. The second thing I'd like to do is to emphasize the importance of the remaining two material from opposition bench. Note that the entire bulk of government material is all about like mental health, and I'll integrate the more extraneous ideas about information asymmetry in the next parts of my speech. The first thing I'd like to emphasize is on the idea of how you create a more personalized experience in the social media. We suggested in Ben and Lia that people don't just log on to social media just to post. They also join to consume content that aligns with their preferences and generate income from it because they're unable to create physical stores. These are two reasons why metrification is important. Gov only gives you mental health, which Lia already explains are not that big of a harm on our side of the house. Why is metrification the kind of it was very important? Firstly, in government, they collect likes and shares, but they do not have any use. It is just stored. On our side of the house, what changes are as follows. Firstly, the content that people consume are aligned with their personal preferences. It means that they do not have to go to trial and error. It means that they don't have to scroll through a lot of different accounts just to find out which follower or influencer they should follow to satiate their desires. But secondly, when it comes to business comparative advantage, what is symmetric is that big and small companies will coexist in the digital sphere. But what changes is that if big companies have a high market share, what we allow businesses on our side to do is to identify specific segments of the population where they can market their goods and services. So also, if on both sides, small companies will always be at the receiving end, what we provide explicitly is a chance for them to succeed at the market, because we give them data-driven solutions to identify market segments where they can take advantage of, as opposed to government, where you just pit these small companies against big companies with no clear idea of what they have to do to move forward.
Thank you, Op reply.
Hello. Can I be seen and heard?
All good, yeah.
It's fine. Quiet.
Sorry, they're very loud. Anyway, I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. If you break government contributions down, you can see two main arguments that they use to try to win the debate. The first is the idea of mental health and how you create a toxic relationship with social media. And the second is more on discourse and information, which you should credit less because most of it comes from Naomi and it's very hard for us to respond that late in the debate. The first is on the idea of mental health and mental health relationships and metrics being toxic. What did I say already coming from first? I told you that this is already a problem of attention-seeking behavior. This is not something that is inherent with how social media itself is engineered, how likes necessarily work. These are factors that exist beyond the motion, right? So this teenage girls, for example, want to grab the attention of their crush, which is why they like to post, for example, engagement farming content, for example, on like IG stories, Facebook, etc. What this means is they fail to prove the solvency as to how they make social media a less toxic and a less addicting place where people don't overthink the reactions and the engagements that they make on the platform. Especially when you want to buy their argumentation about how social media will always want to develop in such a way that it wants to hook users into using the platform more. The second thing that they say, and this is already bleeding into the idea about discourse and conversations that you have on social media and interactions there, is that Naomi tells you that numbers don't lie and you want to remove the unhealthy competition that exists. So for example, if you and your friend post the same kind of selfie and they get 5,000 likes and you only get 50, you're likely to feel sad. You're likely to feel like your mental health is going to be down in the bins. This is a lie. Lia already tells you, right, that you have developed several social conventions to insulate ourselves from the worst instances of these problems happening. So for example, if I compare the engagement that I have with Cavan on Instagram, it is likely for me to accept that that man is going to get more likes than me because his fits are harder, for example. He has better content. He just has a film camera and people like that. Compare that to me, for example, where it's probably not that hardworking, etc. All of this response is just to show that there's so many conventions that we've already formed to shield ourselves from the kind of unhealthy competition that Naomi talks about. But the second thing is just that, guys, we have a life. Like, we have a finite pool of worries, and I'm not going to spend the end of my days worrying about the lack of likes that I get on a Facebook post that I shared that I thought was funny and people didn't think was funny enough. But the second thing, and this is the more important response that I gave, is that numbers don't lie, which is why it's a good thing that it's the common metric that we use to measure engagement. On their world, where engagement is derived with the kinds of comments that you receive, it is when you give people more leeway to overthink, to be more anxious about the engagements that they receive. If, for example, someone said, "Bestie, you're so beautiful," you're overthinking if that's a genuine reaction that they have or something that is ironic and sarcastic and there's actually just trying to bring you down. In the absence of genuine, objectable metrics that you cannot contend to, these are the kinds of mental calculus that people are likely to buy themselves into. Compare that with the analysis that comes from us. The first is analytics bring much needed insights for users and businesses. And what this argument does, it brings a much needed necessity as to why metrics have to come front and center with how we engineer social media. But Cavan tells you we have a variety of alternatives, like market research, like surveys. But if you're a small-time thrift store who only sells Carhartt jackets on IG, you're unlikely to survey individuals. You're unlikely to use sentiment analysis on the comments that you receive, because the comments that you get are mine, grab, steal, heart, for example, and these other things that are just useless and unmeasurable, for example. But second is that Content curation and metrics is important precisely because social media is a sea of content, and you need to curate the experience in a way that is personalized. And you need to do that curation in a way that is transparent, which is the second argument that comes from side government, where the development of the social media platform has to be transparent, has to be known to everyone, precisely because it is a platform where everyone has a stake in. On their world, you give social media companies so much power to do their own bidding with the data that they exclusively own. Proud to oppose.
Thank you. Op reply. Gov reply.
I want to be very clear on our case. We're not claiming everyone magically becomes happy. We are not claiming everyone magically becomes secure. We're not claiming that people stop becoming attention-seeking. This is why this opposition team misses the jump. We are saying that the number of likes, shares, and followers are a source of dissatisfaction among the numerous sources of dissatisfaction we have in our lives that brings very little utility in return. So this team can give us 5 points of mitigation in first and another 5 points of mitigation in deputy and explain why people will always compare and people will never compare sometimes, but they were missing the point. We are removing one way in which people are made to feel like shit. There are, of course, many others. But Ian and I painfully take the time to explain to you why this is a unique source of dissatisfaction, because numerical quantification quantifies just how unpopular and just how ugly you are, and it's very visceral and prevalent in nature. But panel, they did not mitigate us enough because Naomi and I massively widened this margin. We explained that all other ways to chase validation are inaccessible and inconvenient, and it will be borderline psychotic for you to go and count the number of comments that you have in your comment section. Naomi explains the qualitative responses are the ones from your close friends who will love you and show you validation, and this allows the validation to happen in the privacy of your own chat logs instead of having it in the public sphere where there's a basis of comparison. Their mechanism of your friends and family affirming you is outweighed by their own case, because no matter how much my mother tells me short kings are handsome too, I could never fully believe her, because when I open up my Instagram page, I do not get likes when I'm showing my fit pics, and it's quite clear I'm 5'6". Like, seriously, look at the response they have to us. They say in response to the analysis Ian and I gave you, people will scale down their expectation. Panel, I want you to think to yourself, what does scale down your expectation means? Ian gets 5,000 likes, I get 50 likes, and I just scale my expectations down. Yeah, like Ian is a Malaysian superstar, he's really tall, I guess it's normal, he gets more likes, and I'm like not that attractive, so I guess it's understandable, I only get 50 more likes. Like, this response proves our point. The process of scaling down your expectation makes you feel worse about yourself. Panel, I know what you're thinking now. You're thinking, Gov proves a marginal harm to people, or proves a marginal benefit to businesses. How do I weigh this debate? Let me do it for you. We affect the most number of people, millions of teenagers, vulnerable people. Intuitively, you will believe that less people run businesses and more people use social media to post about their own pictures. But let's dissect this claim of online businesses. We observe businesses are physical, and social media is one of their touch points, and businesses have market research, market surveys, and focus groups. So their large benefit, we have shrunk it down by explaining it doesn't apply to that many businesses. And do you know why this is an amazing feature of the debate? Because they minimize their own benefits for us. At some point in the debate, they're not helping all businesses, they're helping the thrift stores online, the small businesses, the micro businesses. So even they themselves admit that this doesn't apply to that many numerical online businesses. And this was painfully unstrategic for this team to do, because social media analytics are more useful when it's larger data sets. If you are a thrift store that only has 100 customers per month, you can manage it internally. You can do surveys with your customer base. But people with part-time businesses that run thrift stores are also people who have full-time jobs. They're not the most vulnerable people. And I just want to note here that me engaging with this business point is very charitable, because check your notes. They don't give you any reasons why knowing how many likes you have improves your business. Like, will you be able to suddenly post better clothes on Instagram because you know how many people are liking things? It doesn't necessarily mean that businesses become wildly successful just because they have market research. The best thing about this is, if you can't decide whether teenagers or businesses are more important, the independent win condition we have is how this worsens social discourse that breaks the deadlock very nicely. But just on a pure comparison, our impacts are large in terms of the mental health harm and the insecurity and the terribleness that it makes people feel. It applies to a large group of people. Even if they mitigate it, we have still reasons to believe that it does make people feel terrible. Their online business benefit applies to an infinitely small group of people that use social media. Overall, it's not a large harm, and also is a benefit that's easily replicable by other sources of information. Even if you believe this is about small businesses, they are the smallest group, and probably those people have other sources of revenue as well. And I just want to note, because this rather frustrates me, this argument about like social discourse came out in my speech at the 5-minute and 50-second mark. Naomi Ang needs to stop stealing my credit, because that was my argument, it was my extension. Stop giving Naomi credit for my arguments.